investors would come. But what they saw initially, our mixer was a 50-gallon pickle barrel bolted to a treadmill bought off Craigslist for like $150. Now you run that thing on fat burn, right? And it starts to turn, and that's how you're mixing your material. And then you've got investors going like, here's my money.
Welcome to another episode of Stocked and Delivered. Today we have a special guest, Josh Dorfman, the CEO of Supercool and founder of Supercool, as well as the founder of PLANTD and many other companies along the way. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Thank you. Great to be here with you guys.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you. I guess just to kick us off, for listeners who may not know what Supercool or PLANTD is, do you want to give us just a brief summary of what you do and what your mission is?
Yeah, absolutely. Perhaps just start quickly with PLANTD. Supercool kind of came out of that. PLANTD, we make carbon negative building materials out of a fast growing grass instead of trees. And quickly to do that, we found something that grows fast in trees. We pull carbon from the atmosphere at a quicker rate. And then we've built a first of its kind production factory that has no smokestack. It's all electric, so we don't give that carbon back in the production. So we can sequester it when we make what ends up being an alternative to oriented strand board or plywood, the materials that we make, structural materials that go into walls, floors, roofs of new homes. As an outgrowth of that, when I stepped down as CEO of that company last year ago, I started looking around different industries, looking at climate innovation, and just started to feel there was so much more happening that was really getting reported on. And so Supercool is a media brand, business to business, that looks across industries to say what's happening today that is beyond the lab, beyond the pilot, has reached commercial scale to cut carbon, boost profits for companies or clients, and improve modern life in the process. And so that's what we've been working on for about 7 or 8 months, and it's been a lot of fun.
Cool. So with Supercool, you have a podcast, you have media articles. What else are you doing?
Podcast, newsletter, YouTube channel. I mean, that's the crux of how we've gotten started. We do some marketing services. We're going to take what we're able to do, how we position. My background, kind of what I brought to PLANTD, what I tend to bring to ventures is around the external facing, branding, communication, messaging, sales. And so we also work with some clients who we think happen to be super cool and help position them in the market with their climate solutions to really have resonance. And I think at the core of that is an understanding that while all of this innovation is here, all of these solutions are here that are wonderful for the climate, customers don't buy things necessarily because they're wonderful for the climate. They buy them because they're wonderful for their own business. And so it's really getting the framing right so that companies can succeed who are doing cool sustainability stuff, but really have a value proposition that resonates for customers. And I just see a lot of that, and we try and help companies do that really well.
And because I agree with that. I think climate conscientiousness has been a trend for maybe 10 years in terms of like you wanting to say, hey, this is good for the environment, but I don't think it does trigger buying behavior. How do you, if you're helping these companies, what is the framework? What does the messaging look like? How do you get someone that's trying to do good, but can't do good if they can't make money to be able to do both?
Well, if you can't help someone improve their business, you can't if you can't help a customer achieve their own goals for whatever they're trying to do, your sustainable product or your sustainable service doesn't matter, right? It's irrelevant because at best it will stay very niche and appeal to people who share those values, which is niche. But like we've talked about, I think when we first met or when we met over PLANTD, we were having that conversation with you guys, so our frame has always been, look, we're going to build a drop-in replacement for what exists today. We're not going to ask anyone to do anything different in their construction, in their methodology. We know that's a fail, right? We know that's we're not going to get escape velocity doing that. We're going to come up with something that we believe and we're testing to say is a better product, whether that's in terms of moisture resistance or fire retardation, but something that actually delivers some value. And we're going to work our tails off to get to price parity and hopefully even compete better on price, just to drive that value. And then hopefully we can get a customer to get on board because we're still new, right? And so there's still that switching cost and habituation. So it's tricky to get it right, but really fundamentally, I think it's having companies that are sustainability driven still talk to customers about what they care about. And I'll give you an example. This is not a company we work with, but it's a company that I love. Have you guys seen AeroSeal? Have they popped up in your world at all?
I may have seen the name, but tell us more.
Yeah, I mean they've been out. I know they've been at some of the home builder shows. AeroSeal basically has a technology that can plug leaks in air ducts, certainly in building envelopes. And if you look at HVAC systems, whether in homes or in commercial buildings, HVAC heating cooling is about 50% of the energy in just about any building in America and around the world, right? It's massive. And then about 50% of that is getting wasted through leaks, usually in the air ducts, also in a building envelope. So 30 years ago, this guy who invented this technology basically came up with a way to create like this particle cloud that if you created negative pressure in the duct, the cloud would travel to the leaks and clog them up, right? And it was like, it sounds really simple, but it's actually technologically pretty challenging. He couldn't make a go of the business. He went to UC Davis. He was more of academic. Carrier acquires this technology in like 1999, 2000. They don't do anything with it. It sits on a shelf for 10 years. They hand it to this guy, Amit Gupta, who's a rising executive in 2010. He looks at it and he says, holy crap, this is going to change the world. And I know that because all my relatives in the UK are basically like living, in the leakiest homes in the developed world. I'm going to leave. I'm going to change my life. I'm going to go turn this into a company, right? And so he does. It takes 15 years to really scale it up. He gets Bill Gates to invest, and now like he's got this thing, AeroSeal. So you could talk about, he could come out there and be like, hey, we got this thing that's going to save the world. We're going to save all this energy, right? Okay, well, some people care about that, but it's like, we're going to help you cut costs in your home. We're going to help you be more thermally comfortable, right? We're going to appeal to the things that people actually care about. If you're a new home builder, we're going to we're going to come in right in the beginning and make sure the envelope's sealed properly. You're going to get whether that's then qualifying for like a net zero ready energy home or whatever it might be, where there's tax credits, right? We need to align this with what the market wants and what consumers want, not with our ethos about clogging up all the leaks so we save the planet. It's really that type of thing.
Curiously, for Super Cool, is it your goal to help the companies with the front-facing brand or the go-to-market strategy in terms of how to convert this industry over, or both?
It's in some respects, it's both. I mean, so Super Cool from a media perspective, right? We're our podcast, our newsletter. So we'll talk to Amit, or we'll talk to, we just talked to this company, Brainbox AI. Similarly has this cool technology to like applies AI to HVAC systems and can cut the HVAC by 20 to 25%, cut carbon. We'll bring them on the show. What I'm interested in doing on the show is one, understanding, okay, you Brainbox AI, you're in 15,000 buildings. These buildings are saving energy, they're cutting carbon, you have scale. How'd you do it? Right? Like I want to know about your technology, but what I really want to know is like, how are you gaining market adoption? It's kind of this question that you're asking me. How are you actually getting customers? How are you growing so quickly? So we can case study that, and I can go write about it, and our listeners can hear it, whether they're in the building industry or construction industry or not, or real estate, and say, oh, that's actually an interesting insight I could either apply to my business, or I work for a REIT or some other commercial construction company. This sounds de-risked to me. I want to go get Brainbox. I want to talk to those guys, and I want to get that into my company. So what we're trying to do is build these business cases and case studies of technologies and business models, playbooks that are working today, so that others can adopt them as well. We wrap a story around it, we wrap data around it, right? We got to make it really compelling so people want to consume it as content. But at the end of the day, what we're really trying to do is get the best ideas to spread even faster. The ones that have scale, are de-risked, and are actually have an ROI behind them.
That's a super cool idea.
Thank you. That's you can just say super cool, over and over again, man. I give you license.
So, education and awareness. So you're media trying to educate the marketplace and bring awareness to these technologies that are out there. And hopefully people listen and do something with it because they're, in theory, good technologies.
Yeah, and the thing for us is I'm not trying to appeal to me, right? I'm not trying to appeal to someone who's like a lifer around sustainability. I'm trying to appeal to business decision makers, could be policymakers, but generally decision makers who, or for whom climate sustainability is increasingly like encroaching in their business life and they have to deal with it, right? It just keeps coming up. And so they're casting around, they're saying, all right, this keeps coming up. I report to the CFO or I am a CFO. How are we gonna, how are we gonna cut carbon? And can we do it in a way where we're actually gonna like dramatically decrease our costs at the same time? What's out there, right? Like we're trying to give the tools to the people who make decisions, um, you know, and this is increasingly something they have to contend with. We think that's the bigger play. We think that's the bigger market. And we just think there's a lot of white space there in the media landscape where that's not being addressed.
So one of the reasons we wanted you have you on our show is there doesn't seem to be, at least from my perspective, many entrepreneurs out there who are like trying to disrupt, right? And there's plenty of entrepreneurs out there who are, building new lumber yards or new supply chains, but not necessarily a disruption. So before we get into PLANTD, I think you have a history of kind of being a serial entrepreneur. Could you just give us a little background on how you got into that? What was your first company? What are things that brought you to where you are today, and like how you got here?
Yeah, thank you for that. My backstory is I grew up thinking about a career in State Department, maybe CIA. I was very influenced to be international, kind of looking internationally from my mom, who gave up a career going into the State Department to raise a family, and so I think it was a big influence on how she raised me and my brother. And so, the 1990s, a year out of college, I went to China for a couple of years. I just thought, oh, you know what? I'm going to go to China. It's 1995. If I get there, cool stuff will happen. I don't know what it's going to be. And I know this relationship is going to be a really big deal in the 21st century. Let me go put myself in the middle of it. And so I was teaching on a university. I ended up getting a part-time job working for a company. I don't know if you guys ever had a kryptonite bike lock back in the day.
Yeah, familiar.
Like
Uh-huh.
this, you should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So kryptonite, this like bike lock powerhouse, probably about 15, 20, 30 years ago, opens their first factory 20 minutes from where I'm teaching English. I get a part-time job in that factory. I'm just happy to learn the culture, show up. It was a crazy experience. I ended up working for them full time, and at the time, 1995, there's a billion people in China riding around on bicycles. And so it's like, oh my gosh, we got the kryptonite bike lock. We got the best bike lock in the world. I'm going to make a ton of money here and I'm going to retire in like 5 years. They're like, yeah, Josh, whatever you sell, 5% commission. I'm like, okay, what's 5% times, a billion, blah, blah. And, and I was like, this is unbelievable. So I was working for Kryptonite for a couple of years, proved much harder to sell into that market than, of course, I understood as a 24-year-old kid. But what I started seeing was tunnels, bridges, highways, all the infrastructure coming in to actually build an automobile economy, which is what they have. And I started thinking like, oh, okay, actually no one here wants a bike. Everybody wants a car. There's a billion people here. I don't know anything about global warming, but what does that mean if there's a billion more cars on the planet? And then you think India and Eastern Europe, everyone's developing, everyone's following this Western model of economic development. I felt like I'd seen the future. I didn't really know what to do about it, but I came back to States, went to business school, and it just never really left. I was like, you know what, we have to deal with this. How do we enable societies to continue to develop well, standards of living to rise for Americans and others overseas, and do it in a way where we bring our civilization into balance with what the planet can sustain. Like it just seemed that basic to me. Eventually what I did was I started a company in 2004, being an American, growing up like, we talked about pre-show in Westchester County, kind of middle and then sort of upper middle class. I was like, all right, I'm freaked out about this stuff, but I live in a culture where people just like, we're a consumer culture. I'm going to try and help consumers consume more sustainably. I started a company called Vivavi, like Viva V, Live Life. It became a modern design, sustainable furniture company. I bootstrapped that business. I was in Brooklyn. I turned my apartment into my showroom. I lived in it for 4 years. It was kind of like I was very, very passionate about it. Out of that came my first media company called The Lazy Environmentalist, which came about because my first employee in that company, on her last day working for me, just basically said to me, like, look, you're not my boss anymore, so I'm going to tell you exactly how I feel about you. And you're the worst environmentalist I've ever met. Like, you're always in the shower, you barely recycle. Like, you basically suck. Like, I kind of hate you, and you're a giant hypocrite. And you know,
Great way to exit.
and,
I like that your
yeah, she was
first
like,
comment was you're
yeah,
always in the shower as like your chief disgruntlement with them.
right,
Wasting
exactly.
our precious resources.
Yeah, exactly. So it's completely true. And I was like, I'm going to own this. She's right. So I wrote this article, blog entry on our little website, and a radio producer somehow found it, called me up, and he was like, hey, this is interesting. Let's turn this into an internet radio show that you, Josh, pay for. But you can have a platform. And I was like, great, that sounds good. Let's give it a go. And then I did, and then that got picked up by SiriusXM, and then it became a reality TV show called The Lazy Environmentalist. And so it was really like this awesome run helping lazy Americans go green. So I've done a suite of stuff, from my own startups to media to working. I worked for Amazon for a bit, built a company called Vine.com. It's kind of like an online Whole Foods. The through line for me is just kind of like what we talked about in the beginning, figuring out how do I make sustainability, whatever word you want to call it, align with people's self-interest so they get excited about it and care. Like, how do I get you, wherever you are in the political spectrum, to actually think like, oh, this is cool. I would do this. I would do this whether I care about the planet or not. Like, that's always kind of driving me because that's how I think you get to big change.
So you start out by having entrepreneurial dreams of being the bike lock salesperson of the century. You realize cars are coming. You make this fast jump in my mind because I don't think I get there like he did. It's like, oh, there's a bunch of cars coming. That means climate. That means global war. I don't think I get there. You get there. You go from the lazy environmentalist to kind of a climate entrepreneur. And then you've built this thing out of curiosity. How has your perspective of making green go mainstream evolved over the past 10 years? I would assume what you originally thought and what you still think may vary similarly or differently over a spectrum. What's changed for you and kind of what you've learned through this experience?
What's changed for me is, I mean, it's the evolution for me, and I've actually seen some others go through this as well, is, in the beginning, I was very excited about trying to help consumers make more sustainable choices. And it sounds great, all these little changes add up. But they don't really add up to much if you look at where we are today. And I hear and see the same conversations that we were having 15, 20 years ago, and now I'm like this generation that's just like wants to like, bitch and moan and just be like, oh, like, no, there's, no progress happening or whatever. But which I've just also seen over and over and over again. But it just feels like this loop, right? Where it's like people are like, oh yeah, we can reduce, reuse, recycle in creative ways. And you can. And there's cool businesses and there's definitely like some exciting stuff. But, I was looking at H&M's sustainability report recently, and about 5 years ago, H&M said, hey, we're going to be, by 2030, we're going to be like circular, right? We're going to be this circular economy, like retail, big fashion powerhouse. And that sounds good. 5 years in, 4 or 5 years in, 0.4% of their business is circular, right? So it's like, it's nothing. I mean, it's great, but it's
Rounding
like,
error in the grand calculus.
so for me, the evolution has, and Planted was part of this, was looking more business to business. Where can you really drive volume? Where can you drive scale? Where can you drive much more impact rather than one consumer choice at a time? And I do think when you look at massive commodity markets or, giant infrastructure, those changes really do add up. And that's been the evolution for me of where I focus.
And with Planted, was it like three guys in the room saying, screw it, let's just build it with grass? How did that come to be?
It's even more ridiculous than that, I think.
Okay.
So I was up in the mountains in North Carolina. I was in Asheville, been there for about 8 years. And I was building the second modern design sustainable furniture company this then during COVID. And it was like flat pack, knockdown furniture, kind of IKEA style, using responsibly harvested wood, FSC certified wood, this awesome plywood that came from Oregon. And at first, it was great, right? For a lot of business, great. We're selling desks, we're selling tables, everyone's at home. And then I just couldn't get material. And when I did, the quality was pretty shoddy, and the prices, of course, were going through the roof. And I kept thinking, like, how could I do a more sustainable material? And in that moment, I met my co-founder who had also moved to North Carolina. Someone connected us, knew that he was also building a small manufacturing company. And so I got on the phone with this guy, Wada, who became my co-founder. And I'm complaining about materials. And he said, well, what would you do? And I said, I don't know, maybe something like hemp. And he said, oh, well, I have 6 trash bags of industrial hemp in my garage. And I was like, what? Like, who are you? What are you talking about? Like, who does that? And so he's like, well, I just spent, 8 years at SpaceX. I was in charge of the life support systems for the Dragon Crew spacecraft, keeping astronauts alive in space. And he's like, and I'm thinking a lot about carbon removal because Elon was talking a lot about carbon removal. And so he was thinking about carbon removal. And so we started saying like, well, what if we could figure out something that grows way faster than trees, maybe hemp, pull carbon from the atmosphere, get his whole SpaceX team together, build a new factory, no smokestack, and really do something amazing. Turn something maybe like hemp, maybe something else, but pull carbon from the atmosphere, but turn it into something useful and durable where you can grow a business. And so that's how. And so 2 weeks later, we both shut our companies down and started working on this together. And then we got Nathan to come, our third co-founder, and was off to the races.
That's amazing. So when the original idea, you didn't know you were going to make plywood well, not plywood. That's the wrong word, I guess, to use. Boards or dimensionals. You didn't know what you were going to make with it. You just knew you were going to use this material to make something.
Also, do we skip the fact that regardless of this guy worked at SpaceX, that he had 6 industrial bags in his garage?
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, why?
Yeah. Well,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Because we were so like simpatico, same wavelength, it's like this dude's thinking about alternative. I can think about it all I want. I can't do anything with it, right? I'm not like a SpaceX engineer. He can think about it and then like he can go build a new system, a new, vertically integrated supply chain. So yeah, it was wild. So we started saying, okay, it was really so basic. It was like, okay, look, we're going to figure out something grows faster than trees. Where do trees go? Well, they get cut down, turned into lumber. What gets made in a factory from trees, right? We know like we're not going to just do 2x4s out there. We're going to get a SpaceX team. So we got to have a factory, right? We got to do something engineered. Yep. And so then we said, all right, well, let's go call up builders. So we started calling up builders, and that was basically it. So we started with green builders who I knew would be excited about hemp. Right? Be like, hey, got these SpaceX guys. We're going to do something we think with hemp. It's going to have a factory. We don't really know anything about this industry, but like, what should we make? And people are like, well, there's a lot of OSB is the most widely used material in a home. So maybe you should do OSB. We're like, great. What's wrong with it? And they're like, well, if it gets wet, you got a problem. Like, there's a problem. Okay, cool. So let's go put a deck together. We're going to make OSB. It's going to be more moisture resistant than whatever it is, and like it's going to be green, and let's go see, like let's just start. That's basically how we started. And whether it's starting with OSB or an OSB replacement is a smart idea or not, you could argue it both ways, right? Since it's the bottom barrel commodity product, it's probably not where like you would. It's not, Tesla didn't say, hey, I'm going to go try and make like a really low economy car with like a cheap car, my first car. But we just thought from the beginning, scale. Great. If this is the biggest product, let's go after the biggest product and we'll figure it out.
Yeah. What's it called? Addressable market. I forget the language.
Yeah. The total addressable market, massive, yeah. Right? It's billions of dollars.
That's great. So tell us where you are now with PLANTD. What's going on now? What products? Fast forward a couple years later. What year did you start? And now we're a couple years into it.
That was 4 years ago. So when you're in it, and on the one hand, it can feel like it's taking a long time, but on the other hand, you're going really fast because we had to stand up. So we backed away from hemp. We did find this grass through the North Carolina Department of Ag that grows like bamboo. People have a sense of how fast bamboo grows. That works for our specifications. It's strong, structural. We can harvest it well. But then we had to figure out everything because there's no agricultural supply chain. You can't just call someone up and be like, "Hey, I'm going to need 1,000 tons of this grass next year to start making panels." That didn't exist. So
Your
started
founder
to
will
say,
have a
"Okay,
couple in his basement.
yeah, exactly, exactly. He's probably got a couple of tons, kind of hidden away for his next thing." Um, but so then you have to say, okay, well, let's figure out a tissue culture lab. How do we make a tissue? What is a tissue culture lab? How do we go do a tissue culture lab? What would it mean to do commercial greenhouses? How do we get these plants to a ready state to go into commercial farms? Who's going to commercially, farm this grass for us? What's that going to look like? So you start to play that all out, and then meantime you're designing and prototyping and fabricating all the machines that go into a new production line, right? And all of that's proprietary, all of that's novel. So where we are is by this past fall, you know, we we've started working and we're coming to market with the biggest builder, with D.R. Horton, the
Yep.
largest builder in the country. This past fall, they ordered 10 million panels from us. For them, that's roughly the equivalent of 90,000 single family homes. Uh, that will, as one might imagine, for a young company, that will take us some time to scale and grow into that order. It's massive for us, and so it's helped us kind of unlock some financing around that. And that is an OSB replacement product, right? That's about a 5/8 inch, thick board structural panel will go into walls and roofs. We have a whole, R&D plan and protocol as we start to think, well, what else could we make? Can we make engineered 2x4s, which we can? Can we make headers? Can we make other products? Yes, we can. So there's a bunch of R&D going to other products that will follow. That will all come. We're excited about it. We can also create something that's similar to a cross-laminated timber or mass timber product for commercial construction because the press is 40 feet long, and you can tune the thickness of the panel. You can make it 5/8, you can make it 3/8, you can make it 1.5 inches, 40 foot long, 4 foot wide, right? So if you start to imagine those dimensions and something that's just a continuous slab of material, well, you can get into commercial markets, eventually with what we think will be a competitive product. So the roadmap is very exciting, but it's really one step at a time.
What's the volatile nature of the price in the products that you're dealing with? Is it similar to that of traditional construction panels? Is it vastly different? Is there an advantage to just knowing that you're a little bit more safe on the downside?
Yes, there's advantage to knowing you're safe on the excuse me, on the downside, and there's advantage to being vertically integrated for us from our cost structure. Right? We know our cost structure, and so we can say to customers, look, this market is volatile for a bunch of reasons, right? But some of it is geopolitical. Some of it is tariffs get slapped on Canada. Some of it is war in Ukraine, and that makes it difficult to import, birch from Russia, Canadian wildfires. So strategically, companies are interested in what we're doing because they see how we're building our supply chain here in the U.S., which can create some of the we can put some of that sort of downside hedge in place, right? Where they know that working with us can help make their supply chain more resilient. And that creates, that creates some opportunity. But really what we're striving to do is meet the market wherever the market's going in terms of cost and price.
So D.R. Horton is a big deal. That's no
Huge
small deal. How do you get that message out? Because I mean, securing a guy like a builder like D.R. Horton certainly would make press in the industry for people to turn their heads and say, maybe I should think about this. What does that look like?
I mean, that's been incredible. That was, us. What can you say? I think it was we were hustling. We had the right team. Um, there's, when you're building, when you're a D.R. Horton or a Lennar or a Pulte, you just have so much scale. You have to think about your supply chain differently, right? You have to look out into the future differently than other builders because you have to make sure that you're going to have ample supply. So I think there were a number of reasons why they were, looking around for potential solutions like ours to complement what they're doing. But for sure, for a young company like us, I mean, it's massive. I know I talked to so many green builders who their total alignment philosophically, ideologically with, okay, a product like made from grass, it's carbon negative. But I understood when they would say, I love what you're doing, Josh. Planted's awesome. I am never going to put that in my house because I'm going to be on the hook for it. How can I trust your product? How can you put,
Yeah.
right? And I didn't, that was such a big thing to surmount and overcome that, yeah, when things aligned with DR Horton and they said, yeah, no, we believe in this. Let's baby step our way. Let's have these proof points, right? That's just massive. And I think it's a real challenge for companies like, I think it's probably why you also don't see quite as much disruption around materials in the market because overcoming those hurdles, right, in an industry like this is so gaining the trust, right? It's just so challenging.
We say all the time, in order to be new in this industry, you need to be 15 years old. And then that's true for like Me Too brands. When you come out to market with a new technology, it's probably even escalated of a comment because to your point, like what happens if this fails? There's a number of builders that we can go back with that have had massive class action lawsuits because of a product failure that, at the end of the day, 15, 20 years down the road, who's on the hook for that? And that is a concern that you have to come over.
We interviewed someone a couple weeks ago who's using rice.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, and that's relatively new as well. I mean, the technology was a little bit older, but he took it on, but it's same concept. And there's other products that are slowly getting more traction, but it's hard because no one wants to try it.
If you're looking for a good podcast interview, we interviewed the guy from Modern Mill. They're doing some really
cool
with rice husks. So you're taking the husk off the rice, which also it's protecting the rice from water infiltration. It's got a lot of really like cool redeeming properties, and they've turned it into some exterior building products.
That's awesome. Those guys are down in Mississippi. Is that where they're manufacturing?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Which I didn't know. Mississippi is one of the largest rice growing states in the United States, and also United States is one of the largest exporters of rice, just generally speaking.
Wow.
Which all was very I wouldn't have guessed.
So
we
were eating a lot of that, back in China back in the day. It was a lot of Mississippi rice.
Yeah. Imagine taking a customer out for some Mississippi rice to sell them a bike lock. I mean, that's serendipitous.
I mean, just doesn't get any better, really.
I think we've just defined the dream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So kudos, 4 years in, and you're making real good headway. I have noticed that the big builders, DR Horton, Lennar, Pulte, they seem to be making investments or try these products in a big way. And I'm sure they negotiate some sort of advantage for them in some sort of way. And they buy a piece of the company in a lot of pieces, or invest or participate in Series A or whatever, Series B, all those different variations of fundraising. So kudos to finding DR Horton, getting DR Horton. That's a big one.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, just to think back on how that all came together it was awesome. I think part of the magic for Planted and for having SpaceX guys is you do get this SpaceX halo, right? So you do get this, you do get people who are willing to trust a little bit more because of when you say, well, I built the, I built this rocket. I
people
did
in outer space. I can build a lot of grass.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. We can build a mill. We can do it. People are like, yeah, okay, that's probably right. But the part of the magic was when people would come early on, investors would come, big customers would come, like DR Horton would come with their, a lot of, their senior leadership, and they would come to our like dingy, crappy little prototype shop in Durham, like tucked away, like, basically the cheapest spot we could find, right? Because we don't want to spend any money. And SpaceX is definitely don't want to spend any money. It's just how they're trained. And they come in and they're expecting a little bit of a dog and pony. Now, this is early on, so we're not doing that much dog and pony. But they're expecting, okay, it's SpaceX. And then what they see, because we're prototyping, right? We're making maybe 5-inch by 7-inch, things with hemp, things with other materials. And we're testing. And the presses are getting a little bit bigger. But what they saw initially, our mixer, right, where we would mix the grass or the hemp or whatever with a little bit of resin, was a 50-gallon pickle barrel bolted to a treadmill bought off Craigslist for like $150. Now you run that thing on fat burn, right? And it starts to turn, and that's how you're mixing your material. And people are looking at that and they're saying, their heads are spinning. And then the SpaceX guys are like, yeah, because we don't over engineer anything. We only engineer what needs to be built for the cheapest amount possible. And then you've got investors going like, here's my money, right? Like you guys are going to be incredible stewards of my cash.
That's very
right?
interesting.
And
That's a good.
Yeah, it's, I got to see it. So here, do you mind?
Yeah, go for it.
There is a number of very good climate conscientious companies, and then there's also a number of companies that claim to be climate conscientious that I don't know like fully are. When you think about the net build, what are the things you look for or look out for when you have someone touting climate conscientiousness to really like dive like what is real versus like what's not so real,
to validate it?
You know what I mean?
I do. Yeah. For me, it's a lot of this comes, I think, from the lazy environmentalist where we had to have some standard. I was interviewing people and it was consumer driven stuff. And it was saying, hey, this is green, this is not green. Okay, well, what does that mean? And so I think when it comes to materials, I always had this thought like, okay, if we're going to talk about a t-shirt, right? Or we're going to talk about something that's like someone saying it's green. I had kind of my own subjective bar, but I said, you know what? I think I'm not talking about anything that isn't at least 50% something sustainable, organic, hemp, whatever. And I understood the materials, right? Like you got to be at some 50% bar, recycled content or whatever. Otherwise, like it's not interesting to me. And the reason why I would kind of set the bar there was because I know, just like you guys, I think you guys would know, if a company's going to change their materials, there's this whole decision-making chain that has to have taken place through sourcing, right? Through supply chain, through ops, like quality control. Everyone needs to be on board, like touching that thing for the finished product to actually have like a lot of, a high content, sustainable content. That was one way we looked at it. Today, when I'm looking at it, for super cool, what I want to understand, it's actually a different lens. I'm not looking at that content as much as I'm looking at carbon reduction. So what can you tell me about carbon reduction related to your product? That's what I want to know. And, how are you quantifying it? And so it's a gut. Some of it's gut. I mean, some I see what they're reporting. Some I see if there's third party, validation. But that's really what I want to know. How are you cutting carbon in what you're doing? And kind of like we were talking about also initially, a small company, now hopefully PLANTD becomes a huge company, but a small company can say, hey, we're carbon negative, man. Like we have this totally new disruptive thing. Awesome. A big company could say, we are implementing this tool from Johnson Controls, this new AI that comes in that runs like all of our, systems in our buildings, and it's going to cut energy consumption by 10 or 15%, right? Now you might say, oh, 10 or 15%, that doesn't sound like it's changing the planet. But then you think, well, the scale of like an airport that can cut 10 or 15% of its carbon because it has, right, new technology just running in the background is just massive, right? And so I kind of start to look at it a little bit differently when I think, okay, what is the carbon reduction? What is at scale? What does this solution actually do, both for the customer, for the business, for the consumer, and for the planet? That's how I'm looking at things these days.
So
does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. So from that lens, I'm sure you've met a lot of people along the way. You've quickly realized that some of them are just hacks, that they're saying one thing but not doing anything they're really saying?
Not really, because the businesses that we're talking to, I mean, I'm thinking about it as you're asking me, and I'm thinking about like because my thought is like, no, I'm not. That's not really coming up. Maybe it's the filters we're applying to go look for solutions,
Yeah.
but you can't really fake cost savings. Like you can't really say like, oh, this company, Family Dollar just saved, 20% because they swapped out all their, their old lighting and all their stuff for our solution. Like you can't really, it's hard to make that up when you're talking about solutions that are at scale. And so I don't really dismiss stuff because I think the claims are bogus. We just have a lens where a filter for super cool, where we're only talking about things that are commercially available and scaling today. We don't, we're not TechCrunch. We're not talking about, oh, this awesome company just raised $100 million and one day maybe we'll all have like saran wrap made out of algae. Like it's awesome and someone else is going to cover that, but like we're not going to cover it because it doesn't exist. It exists on a press release and in a lab somewhere. That's really our filter. It's like you're not coming on our show if it's not real.
Yeah.
So every podcast we do, we have 3 segments. They're all aptly named after lumber double entendres. First one is called Saw It Coming. This is about future predictions. Can you name maybe a major trend in what you're doing right now that you feel people are sleeping on?
Yeah, I think one of the major things that we're seeing is the rise of virtual power plants. Are you guys familiar with virtual
No,
power
no,
plants?
say more.
Okay. So the thing that's coming is this relationship between homes or businesses, but buildings that are customers of the grid, customer of grid energy. And traditionally, that's been a one-way relationship, right? Like I buy energy from the grid supplies energy to me. What's changing today is that it's becoming a two-way relationship, right? Where homes and businesses are increasingly saying, yeah, I'm going to buy energy from you. You might buy energy from me, but also we're going to be like homes are getting woven into these like virtual power plants, like in thousands or 200,000, homes could woven together. That's a lot of, they use a lot of energy. They can also curtail that energy, right? They can cut their demand. And by cutting demand, they can like the grid, then it's almost like they're feeding energy back to the grid, right? So if it's like really hot and people are like, hey, cut the AC, then you don't have to fire up a peaker plant. It used to be a terrible experience. It used to be, all right, well, I'm going to buy like a Nest thermostat and then my utility is going to send me something in the mail and say, hey, check this box if you're willing to let us control your thermostat when it gets hot, right? And you're like, and we'll like, you make $50 something a year if you agree. Cool, I agree. And then suddenly you get on a really hot, terrible day, they cut your AC and you're pissed off, right? And it's like, well, all right, well, that's awful. It's an awful customer experience. Today, because of AI and other technologies, you sign up for that same thing with your utility, and the AI in that device is able to look out 6 hours from now and say, oh my gosh, it's going to be 100 degrees 6 hours from now. Let's start cooling the house now because we know in 6 hours the utility is going to come asking for the energy, and the homeowner's not even going to necessarily know that like we actually curtailed their energy, but we did, and it smooths out the grid. This is kind of this virtual power plant that's happening. It's big business, it's big opportunities. Lots of companies are trying to own it, and it's going to help everybody, save a little money, make a little money in the process.
That's really cool.
If that becomes mainstream, the major fight in my house goes away. I no longer blame my wife for changing the temperature in the home. I mean,
Yeah.
saves not only saving the environment, saving marriages.
Saving that's really good. That's really good.
You should call one of them and tell them that's a good
we just had the guys on this week who came from Google Nest, like the Google Nest thermostat. Their things for new home. Yeah. And they're all about language and communication. I'm gonna actually ping them and be like, yeah, save energy, save your marriage.
Yeah.
That's good.
So this next question may be a softball, but in 10 years, what do you think will be the biggest building material that no one is currently using?
It's definitely going to be grass. Undeniably, it will be grass. It will not be unlikely that it will be the Kentucky blue. It will likely be, Planted's proprietary blend. Maybe some others might try to follow what we're doing, but we just think long term the economics are in our favor. We think we win in the field, we think we win in the factory, and we think we win in the material itself, in terms of additives and what needs to go into our product versus others.
So you're in this space. You've probably spoken to a lot of others trying to disrupt. Are there other materials besides from plant that you're seeing that like could be a big winner in some sort of way, whether it's competing with you or maybe in a different niche?
Yeah, I mean, what I think is cool, the coolest thing that I've seen that excites me is some of the things I'm seeing happening with straw bale construction. Straw bale's been around, I think, since the dawn of time. People, have been building with straw, and straw is ubiquitous across the globe, very cheap. There's a company called Eco Cocon, I believe, because they're Eastern European. They're starting to really achieve some economies of scale, building these straw bale walls and building like massive warehouses, sky rises, or tall buildings across Europe using straw bale because they've figured out a manufacturing system to make that viable commercially. And that's really cool to me because it's sort of been this sort of very alternative, very like extreme alternative material, like back to the landers are going to use straw bale. But to see that start to get some commercial viability and go into some beautiful buildings, I think that's pretty neat.
Our second segment, material moments, personal stories in the business. Can you tell us about a moment that maybe you almost gave up? Help us understand what got you through.
Well, the moment that comes to mind is, I think it was probably about a year and a half ago. I got a text message from someone at TR Horton, and it just said, "Do you hunt?" And I grew up in Westchester County, outside of New York City, and I was like, "Well, like, no, I will do anything, especially to continue to earn this business. What's up?"
Yeah.
And he
What do I
said,
gotta
"Well,
kill?
we." Yeah, so he said, "Well, we want you to, you're coming to DR's ranch right after Thanksgiving, for a week. We're gonna go hunting." Great, that sounds great. Let me go to Banana Republic, buy some like stuff that
Of
look.
course you
I
do.
don't know anything about this.
Yeah, no,
I
that's
don't know
where you
anything
go for
about
hunting
this.
materials.
Yeah,
Everyone knows that. Everyone knows
right,
that.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
That's,
Yeah,
not,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
exactly where I would go too. Banana Republic. We're going hunt Banana Republic. Let me get a nice cashmere sweater to go hunting
Yes,
with.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Look good in the lodge. Look good. Yeah, it's awesome. I'm gonna outfit myself. I'm on the plane flying out to Dallas.
In Banana Republic here.
Looking very dapper,
Yeah.
taking my NRA, hunter's license test on the plane, which is really interesting, very difficult actually. Like I was like, this is one of the hardest tests I've ever taken, and then I found myself in a blind, on a 60,000 acre, ranch out in West Texas at 5 a.m. They're like, here you go, we'll be back. Suggest you don't get out until we come back. So I wouldn't say I almost gave up, but I was questioning a lot, while I was out there by myself in the cold
It's not easy to get deer
early morning.
out of cashmere, by the way. It's a fun
Yeah.
fact. Yeah.
I did get my first deer out there.
Did you?
Too.
Congrats.
Yeah. Yeah. That was quite a thing.
What's a lesson from a mentor or partner that you still carry with you every day?
Don't be an idiot. Okay, that's Michael Scott. But
Yeah.
the 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 lesson that I still carry to this day is that even it actually, I mean, it came from my dad, and the lesson was, so I had this radio show on Sirius XM, and whatever. Like, was it the most popular show? No. Was it important to me? It was very important to me. And then it got canceled. And it got canceled in a way where I felt was, no one wants to get canceled. I didn't think it was handled that well. But then they asked me to come back in a couple of weeks and do another show with someone else that they were testing to see if that person might become talent for them. I was already fired, and I was like, I was pissed off. And I was talking to my dad about it, and he was like, just do it. He's like, he's like, yes. Is it, does it, is it right of them to ask you? No. But is it a big deal for you to take an hour and go do it? No. Just end on the right note. Just go do it. And so I did, and it turned out to be this woman, Linda Fossa, who had she had a cool company. She had been a model. She was really connected. She got me my agent at William Morris Endeavor because she was like, "You're awesome. I'm gonna hook you up." Not for doing the show. Like she didn't know I was doing her right, but she was still like, "I think I think you're great." And so I ended up getting, an agent out of it, and it just stuck with me, right? Like just do the thing. You can't control how other people are gonna act towards you, whether they're gonna do the right thing. You do the right thing, and karma, whatever it might be, it's things tend to work out.
All right, our last segment is quick cuts. It's just rapid fire. I'm going to ask our first question to go back from the very beginning of our interview today. What is the proper length of time to take a shower?
Oh, that one's easy. Probably about 20 minutes.
Easy. For your first job ever?
I was a gas station pumper attendant.
Nice.
Most underrated climate solution?
Shaving your head.
I'd like to stop quick cuts for a second. Why?
You shave your head, no shampoo, shorter shower.
Shorter
right?
shower,
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
God, it all comes back.
Yeah. No product. No waste, no plastic, no shampoo bottle.
What's your go-to pump-up song before a big meeting?
I don't actually know I don't know if I can say this one because
no,
I don't know.
Just sing it for us. It's okay. Just sing it as loud as you can.
We both know.
It's like a soccer anthem now because it's in Spanish. It's like
if you can find that song, Ike, for the intro to this podcast, I'd love if we can play that.
You got it.
I'd love that if we can play that.
That's it.
You know it. I have no idea what he's talking about.
I know.
It's great.
I got it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good pump up song, right?
Yeah. Isn't that the Mets? The Mets were playing that? No. Yeah.
Well, the Mets have that picture that has the.
I know. I'll get the song. We're gonna intro you with that song. That's a good one.
Beautiful.
One thing you wish more people knew about green building or sustainable building.
One thing that I wish they knew about sustainable building, that sustainable buildings are healthier buildings.
Josh, we appreciate everything you've done. This was a really fun one,
cool.
To be quite frank. I learned a lot more than I thought I was. Well, I should say a lot more than I thought, but I learned a lot. So I certainly appreciate you for that. I'm going to be very conscientious over the next week, Michael, if you smell me in the office. I did that with great intention. I'm going to be taking shorter showers now. I didn't even give it much thought. So you're
on your way, man. You're on your way.
I'm taking the initial steps that are necessary here. Can't thank you enough. Really appreciate you, Mike. Any closing thoughts?
We've had this is probably our 20th episode. We haven't really had a TV, a radio personality with a voice kind of like you. So you've made it a lot of fun, and wish we had more of those because it makes it a lot easier to have the conversation. So appreciate everything. Thanks for the time.
Thank you, guys. It was a blast, a lot of fun. Now I'm gonna go play that song.
I love that. I'm gonna play it too.
Yeah, we got some meetings coming up this afternoon, so we will. Thank you again, Josh. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, appreciate it.